Hi there, I'm Jane Rosegrant. I'm one of the grants advisors for Shift the Power Comic Relief Scotland program, and I'm going to do a brief session on finance and governance, which is needed in order to apply for this project. What we're going to cover today are the financial records that you require to submit to us, the level of independent examination required, and this is sometimes a new thing to some of the smaller groups, so that's an important section. What an examiner's statement might look like, how you go about sending us your accounts and what those accounts might look like, why we need accounts, and then finally a very brief discussion of Shift the Power program and governance that you need within your organization. So what financial records do you need to provide? If you're a registered charity, we simply need the most recent accounts that you provided to Oscar. That's an easy one. If you're a new organization that's been operating for less than a year, we'd ask to see projected figures for the current year. If you're a constituted voluntary or community group, there are 3 possible brackets that you could fall into for this kind of information. First of these is if your income is under £10,000. In this case, we ask for an annual income and expenditure statement. It does not need to list every kind of income separately. It does not need to list every single kind of expenditure separately. We're looking for broad headings that cover things like rent, transportation, food, and giving us a total. Be sure to include all the expenses that you have and all the income that you've had in that year. It's also very important that that statement be signed by your treasurer or chairperson. An example of what these accounts might look like is on this slide. So you can see we need to have them dated at the top, day, month, and year. You need to have a column listing your income. These are just examples of the kind of income you might have. You might have other types than this. You might not have all of these types. It's just to give you an idea of what we're looking for. The same goes for the expenditure column. We're looking for, broad groupings of expenditure. So some of the main expenses groups have often are things like insurance, equipment, room hire, but you might have completely different things than that. And you might very well not have all of these expenditures. Just do the things that are correct for the type of work that you're doing and the way that your group operates. We also need to then know whether you ran a surplus or a deficit in that year. So was your income higher than your expenditure? So you ended with a surplus, or the other way around, in which case you ended with a deficit. That's that total figure there. We'd like to know how much funding you were able to carry forward from the previous year. Some groups might have a negative figure there, some will have a positive. You need to add that to the year's surplus and deficit, and that tells us what your total funds available are at the current time. For some groups, they'll have received money which is set aside can only be spent on a very specific purpose. So if, say, you have a £100 grant, which is only to be spent on one particular project, you could list that here, because then we know that that money isn't available for you to use on this program or for some other types of work, and that's also important. The important principle here is that you give us the financial information that does a clear job of describing the work of your group. We're not trying to make it harder for you than it needs to be, but we do need to have that information available. If you're a group whose income is between £10,000 and £100,000, we need the same kind of income and expenditure statement. We still ask for it that the accounts are signed by the treasurer or chairperson of your group, but we also ask that they need to be checked and verified by an independent examiner. So an independent examiner is somebody who is familiar with financial record keeping at a similar level to your organization. It could be a treasurer of another group or a community support worker. It could be somebody like a bank manager or accountant or somebody retired from those professions. It doesn't have to be somebody at that level necessarily, depending on how complicated your accounts are. That's up to yourselves to know. The person carrying out the inspection needs to be impartial and should have no connection to the management committee of your group. That means that they should not be a member of the management committee or a relative or anyone else closely involved with the administration of the organization. They also can't be one of your main donors or one of your main beneficiaries. They shouldn't be a business partner or an employee. So you get the idea. They need to be somebody who is separate from your group but knows enough about accounting and finances to be able to make a useful comment on your accounts. This is an example of the kind of statement that an examiner can write up and submit. It needs to be, again, an appropriate independent person who's inspected your accounts and financial records. The important thing is that the examiner is able to say that the finance statement you have submitted matches to the accounts that you keep, the records that you keep of your expenditure and your income for your organization. So that's what they're looking to say. They need to print their name, sign and date the statement, and give us a way of contacting them in case we have other questions. If your income is over 100,000, then we're asking for accounts that are independently verified by a suitably qualified person, such as an accountant. So it needs to be somebody with a relevant professional qualification because things are getting a bit more complicated at that level. And you also need to be able to provide that signed statement with your accounts. So sometimes groups ask why we need to see these records. We're not simply doing this to make things a bit more complicated or to hoops for people to jump through. It really is useful to have a snapshot of your organization's finance and capacity because it tells us things like what other funding you have coming in and the amount of finance that you're used to managing, so that we can see that you have a good chance of succeeding in managing this grant. It provides reassurance that you've got procedures in place for the proper management of money and funds. And that's important for groups, not just for applying for grants such as this, but in being able to describe your work and account for it to the local community and the people that you're working with. A final thing that I'm going to talk about is about the governance documents that we ask to see for the Shift the Power program. So this is slightly separate, but related to the finance documents. The main thing is that we need to have a constitution that we can look at if you're not already a registered charity. If you're a registered charity, then Oscar has your constitution and that's already been taken care of. If you're a voluntary and community group that's not a registered charity, we need to see something so that we can look at how you've set yourselves up and what the work is that you're trying to do. The important things to remember are that the Constitution needs to be signed by somebody on your committee. It needs to be dated. It has to include something called a dissolution clause, which means that it says what happens to your money and any equipment that you own if the group closes. And it has to show that that's going to another community organization or to a charity, and that individuals can't benefit from that. The Constitution also has to have something that states that you are a not-for-profit organization. We need to see this so that we can see that all the groups that we're funding are well run and are managing their money properly and treat people fairly. For community groups, we need to see that you have a governing body with a minimum of 3 committee members or trustees or directors, whatever you call yourselves. If there are family members involved, there has to be at least 1 independent member of the group. You ought to be meeting regularly. That doesn't mean weekly, it doesn't mean monthly. It depends on the size of your group. Most groups need to meet quarterly, and it's important that you take some sort of minute at these meetings. That can just be a handwritten note that says who attended and the date of the meeting. And again, that's very useful for showing evidence of your community, of your activities, and that you're working well within your community. There's a lot involved in what we've just been through, so if you have any questions, do feel free to email us on shiftthepower@corra.scot or phone us on the number provided. We'd be happy to talk things through with you. What we really want is for groups to come away feeling like there's not too much being asked of them and that you understand what we need to see. We want to help you get there. So do get in touch if you have any questions at all. Thanks for listening.